our holiday feast. Americans of our age are consciously attuned to variations on the theme of democracy and the diversity that is symptomatic of the exceptionalism that distinguishes our republic from other nations. February is the month that our leaders have consecrated for the annual celebration of Black history, which is inextricably enmeshed with the lives of everyone who was either born or naturalized in America. But the acknowledgement and recognition of this typically American phenomenon is attributable in large measure to celebrities of other nationalities and ethnicities for many, many years, particularly after the proclamation of slavery as an abomination. I recall Orme, an accomplished educator, librarian, and a long-time member of the Writers' Club, telling us stories about the intellectual star of the universe, Albert Einstein, who lived in Princeton, close by her, and he patronized her parents' stationery business and bookstore. While I'm not sure that his credentials, he was sworn in as a U.S. citizen in 1940, warranted the presidency of Israel, it is an undisputed fact that in addition to his reputation as a marvelous scientist and the exponent of the theory of relativity, which was fundamental to global scientific development, that he, renounced Nazi racial laws and policies restrictive of the economic and social opportunities of Jews and blacks in Germany, and B, he frequently objected to the systemic mistreatment of African Americans and became active in their civil rights movement. Persons of education and experience fully understand that no one is picture perfect, and definitely not for their entire lives. And May Braidman has shared with us an instance in which the revered professor, having entered the store, forgot, as several husbands often do, what he was supposed to be purchasing. He was obliged to borrow the phone and call his wife. But it never occurred to any of us that this portended that a great scientist had, because of this lapse, lost all intelligence and was unable to function, and that somehow his memory was irretrievable. As you and I can attest, many of us at age 85 would disregard these trifling lapses as matters, quote-unquote, de minimis, of no consequence whatsoever. There is something refreshing about our writers' group that needs to be appreciated by our critics. It is my observation that we all, like May, have demonstrated the courage to speak our truths based not on fiction, but on personal convictions garnered from our personal life experiences and our socialization. It is in this context that I express my sadness that young black people feel compelled to assert, to prove their value as cultured and educated humans. I grew up in Jamaica under the shadow that the slave system cast on our ancestors. Later, I was groomed by education to be a worthwhile British citizen and someone of integrity. It was only when I resided in the UK post-1962 that the burden the need to defend one's ethnicity and diversity was imposed on me. I was traumatized, to put it frankly, by the scurrilous utterances that defamed blacks and multiracial mixtures, colloquially expressed by the use of the word royal instead of African. But in addition to this pressure from denigration, racist and opportunistic politicians like Enoch Powell fought against the non-Aryan population. He leveled abuses at Indians in England in 1978. And Donald Trump leveled abuses at all manner of non-Americans, particularly Mexicans and Haitians, in 2018. Spineless sycophants in the US have only exacerbated the injury to blacks, whereas the attempt in England was stamped out by fellow conservatives in the party leadership, and the miscreant was punished by his own caucus. It is therefore not surprising to me that in Britain they have an independently wealthy Hindu as Prime Minister today, a far cry from the poisonous rivers of blood rhetoric of 1968. Provocative, racially skewed attacks on fellow citizens must be condemned before this malady intensifies, as it surely shall, because the aggressors know it intimidates young African Americans, as much as I suppose it is traumatic to a person of my age. Coincidentally, I am 4 years older than the sitting president. Hate is flowing across the country, and the instances of egregious actions are on the increase. But even that is not really new. Just a throwback to when entire progressive black communities were the targets of malicious destruction of property. It's not much of a coincidence that leaders like Hitler fostered race hate, which has hurt and demoralized blacks. In similar fashion, the January 6 violence curtailed the official counting of the elector ballots. To a keener observer, this readily aligns with a cult parading as a wholesome desire for racial purity and anti-black unity, attired in the sanctity of white robes, concealing their weapons, and the witch's hood of the Ku Klux Klan. The Klan is an American white supremacist terrorist hate group founded in 1865. It became a vehicle for white Southern retaliation against emancipation. Sometimes the way we are misled make other nations wonder if we have really understood the extent to which we have been marginalized. At least we know that there are two stout defenders of blacks, Einstein, as I've mentioned before, and Biden, who has proved it over and over, but not Jim Jones, the spiritual leader of the Temple cult. Their community, called Jonestown, became internationally infamous when 990 members of the cult died by murder-suicide in 1977. I'm painfully aware that something significant was missing from the reports I read, and it turned out, to my surprise and horror, that 70% of the membership that perished was African American. Who knew that? People brought down systemically to the depths of deprivation and hopelessness are often trapped into some insane conspiracy by a scheming megalomaniac posing as redeemer. It only takes one narcissistic type, like Adolf Hitler or Jim Jones, to name two, to exploit our downtrodden in a criminal, patronizing endeavor. Involved in this ill-fated mission was the ambassador of Guyana to the US, Lawrence Mann. I actually knew him as he was a colleague in my 1957 History Honours class at the University of the West Indies. It turns out that he helped the Jones Commune to obtain government tax and duty exemptions from the Guyanese government, thereby facilitating the cultists at Jamestown, Guyana, a vast country, parts of which are threatened by the Venezuelans. He was someone who could be an activist in a black cause, but it is rumored that he was manipulated by a female member of the group. When the cult's membership was tragically decimated, Mann was deeply disturbed, and he was so upset that eventually he committed suicide. I am sympathetic because, like me, he was socialized to be active in causes that lifted black communities and peoples. Requiescat in pace, Bunny. The burden of a black man's activism is great and multifaceted. Since 1976, every American president has designated February as Black History Month. The Black History Month theme for 2024 is African Americans and the Arts. And since the 1976 declaration by President Ford, which legislated activities for Black History Month, there have been notable black firsts and a couple of events that are symptomatic of the trends in the history of blacks. In 1999, Bernard Harris was selected to be an astronaut. He went into space in 1993 and he walked in space in February 1995. Condoleezza Rice, 2005, and Barack Obama, 2008, became the first black Secretary of State and the first black President of the United States. Kamala Harris was elected the first black woman Vice President in 2020, and in 2022, Ketanji Brown Jackson was the first woman appointed as a justice, black woman appointed as Justice of the Supreme Court. John Singleton was nominated as the first black director for Boys in the Hood. In the series Genius, MLK, and Malcolm X, Kelvin Harrison Jr. stars as Dr. Martin Luther King, alongside Aaron Pierre, who plays Malcolm X. Bob Marley in One Love is opening in theaters on Valentine's Day. Kingsley Ben Adir plays the reggae icon Bob Marley, and Bashasha plays Rita Marley. I think the success of this movie is likely to make a difference to the Jamaican tourist industry. However, I have noticed that on at least one occasion, the ad appeared online alongside a very negative US travel advisory about the dangers of crime in Jamaica. And although the Tourist Board of Jamaica has forcefully, in a recent release, pushed back on this, one never really knows what will happen in this sort of scenario. As we face the uncertainties of the election, my earnest message to my fellow citizens, both black and white, borrows from the message in the One Love movie. Whatever else we do, you must understand the geopolitical situation. Do not latch onto any cult or any cult leader who may falsely claim he's working to ease your pain and ignore his own. All I can beg of you is to remember Jonestown and remember the Capitol riots that stopped for some appreciable time the counting of electors, although a constitutional crisis was averted. Finally, remember, don't take your gaze off parasitic Russians. In Ghana, 9,000 people were murdered. A top Guyanese police investigator said about the massacre that letters bequeathing more than $7 million to the Communist Party of the Soviet Union were carried out of the People's Temple commune at Jonestown in a suitcase full of money. The insurrectionists, numbering about 900, have been arrested, charged, and some are already rotting in jail. That's even more frightening because if, as Trump has alleged, he had offered to send troops to Nancy, or maybe it was Nikki, and that had been accepted, many more would have perished on that day. The message that should reverberate throughout this republic is for all of us to demand and encourage bipartisanship among lawmakers. We must vote for peace and wise leadership to accomplish the things vital to our survival as a flourishing economy and a nation of love. Lying and incivility can have no place among our traditional political parties and their black or white extreme activists. On this holiday, celebrating Black history, persons of goodwill should not turn off their plain humanity. And we appear to be making some headway economically. And we must do so interracially as well. And in accordance with the 2024 Black History theme, we are raising up the arts and artists of the Black diaspora. Jah knows we can't do much better than love one another. Man liebt, mein Freunde. One love, my friends.